All right, you fellow tinkerticians, listen up. Well, I finally got into the gear again. Here's the gear. Remember, when it was press fitted on this shaft here, there's a spline here. And over time, yeah, my fingernails are long. Uh, this gear split. And one person said just solder it back. Very little meat. So what I did, I can barely find here's the spot here. What I did was I took a very fine piece of brass wire. All right, here it is here. I cleaned everything up. I flowed my solder. I tinned a piece of this. I put it down between the teeth and I soldered it. And then I cut in between the teeth with a triangular file. I think this one might be it here. Yeah, this is the one. All right, now I got a gear. Now, it tracks pretty good on the gear, but it's possible that when I press fit it over this line, it'll explode and pop again. I don't know. But my last video, I said the word stave for the ladder, and the ladder has a rung. And I'm like, stave, that sounds really familiar. And oh, a barrel's got a stave. So then, of course, Story comes rushing back. I go for a long ride. I'm talking 20 miles in one direction. And there was this house I always stopped at. I knew the people, and they had a faucet outside, and it was spring water. So I'd always stop there and make sure it worked. And then I would take I would take a drink of water from my water bottles, rinse them out, and put the new well water in for the ride back. So one time I went there, and they were home, and they're in the backyard, and the father's got the two young daughters holding staves up for a barrel, and he's got masking tape. And the guy is an engineer at a company. He actually has an engineering degree through the company. He didn't go to college for an engineering degree. He worked his way up to so he's trying to put a barrel back together, a wooden barrel, a big full-size one that you make wine in. I don't know if you've ever made wine. I've made it, but I used water bottles, glass water bottles, 5-gallon, 10-gallon, whatever they were. They go on top of the water fountain at work. You have to flip the bottle in. They're plastic now, but in the old days they were actually glass. So anyway, I go back there and I sit down. I'm taking a break and I'm watching this. And the father's like a really nice guy, but he's really aggravated because he took the barrel apart. And normally old timers, here's what they do: they take an old barrel. After they're done making the wine, the first racking you would call it in the barrels, then what they do is I guess they rinse the barrels out or whatever, and to sterilize it, they put this special candle down inside the barrel, and they light it, and it smokes, and it sterilizes the inside of the barrel, so you don't get any fungi in the wine. That's one way of doing it. So, it's also, you can wash it out with sulfur bisulfate. I'm remembering some of this stuff because I used to sterilize my corks. I had a corker capper. I used to make wine, and I used to make root beer from scratch. But anyway, I'm sort of sitting there, and I'm looking at him. He's like really aggravated, and he's telling the girls to stop moving, stop jiggling, and they're trying to hold the staves in a circle up in the air, and he's got masking tape. And after a while, I'm watching him like I didn't want to be there. And then he comes over, he sits down, he goes, "What do you think?" I said, "Do you got the lid for that barrel?" And he goes, "Why?" I said, let me just see the lid." And it's a wooden lid, both top and bottom. And I take the lid over and I set it on the ground, and I notice the staves all the way around. Each stave has a groove in it towards the ends, and they go onto this. The lid goes into this track. So I put the stave up against it, and I'm thinking, if this lid was just off the ground a little bit, and I don't know if I grabbed a TV guide or a newspaper nearby, and I folded it and I stuck it under the lid. And now I could put the stave, its groove, into the lid. The lid is tapered on the ends. And so I'm like, okay, what would hold it? And I'm like, I looked over and on the ground, there's one of the rings for the barrel. Let's see, hoops. They call them hoops. And I bring it back over and I lay it over the lid. So I picked the hoop up a little bit and I put the stave in there against the lid, and the edge of the lid that's tapered goes into the stave, and the hoop is holding. They're like I'm able to stack him in a circle. He got up off that chair so fast. He come over and started helping me. We're dropping the staves in there, and it's all the way around. And now he knew how to do the rest. I don't know what happened, but he got the bigger hoops, and he put the bigger hoops on as we were rounding up the staves at the top. And then later on, he took the bigger hoops off and put the smaller ones on. And then, but anyway, so we get over sitting down, and we got the barrel all back together. We got both the top and the bottom on it, and he's filling it up with water, and it's leaking like a sieve. And I'm like, oh, how would you fix that? He says, oh no, he says the barrel tightens up. So after about a half hour, it was barely leaking. But at some point, I said to him, why did you take the barrel apart in the first place? He says, well, I got like 5 of them, and I wanted to sterilize them by using a torch. And I'm like, you torched the inside of the barrel? And he says, no, I took the staves out and torched each one to sterilize it. And I said, are you making whiskey? And he looks at me like weird. I said, are you making whiskey? He said, no, I'm making wine. I said, you can't do that. I said, think about it. That burnt flavoring from the wood is going to go in your wine. The look on his face. He's like, holy crap. Yeah, I said, what do you, I knew about the candle. I knew about the sulfur bisulfate. He goes, what am I going to do? He says, I got the grapes. I said, look, I gave him the address of my guy, which was it was down the street. I said, go down there and tell him you want some water bottles. I told him that. He says, I can get those at work or at the fire department. I says, okay. And I told him, why go over to the wine guy and get these airlocks, and he'll show you these airlocks. So the next time I go to the guy's house, I go inside, and he's got these water bottles with wine in them, and he's got the airlocks that I used. I read up on it. Great hobby. I don't drink wine. I used to make it and give it out as gifts. But I don't want to start telling those stories. But basically, you say to the person, when you're done with the wine, rinse the bottle out for me, because the bottles were like $1.25 each. And you got to get bottles that are all the same height, otherwise you got to keep changing the cork or capper unit. And every one of them would forget. Now, wine, if you make it yourself, besides it having wine stuck to the bottom of the bottle, homemade wine is going to have some, not algae, oh my God, yeast. And yeast is very sticky. And in order to clean the bottle out, you have to put sand in the bottle with some soapy water. And you have to, you're watching TV and you're spinning it around. You're swishing it around in the bottle. And you do that to a bunch of bottles. And then you dump the sand out. And all because the person didn't rinse the bottle out. If the person would just freaking rinse the bottle out, all you have to do is put some sulfur bisulfate in the bottle and do one final cleaning, double inspect it, and then put your wine in and do your corking. But it was so funny. I said, the guy, you making whiskey? And he's looking at me, why are you saying whiskey? I said, well, when you make whiskey, they do burn the inside of the barrels to put the flavor into the whiskey. He's like, oh, son of a bitch. Yeah, in other words, he got the idea to burn the inside of the bottles from probably watching a program on whiskey. But when you do that, man, wine, just any kind of contamination or any type of, it gets in the flavoring of the wine. But it's real funny. The next time I visit and I go inside, there's the water bottles. And what the hell was it? It wasn't Poland Springs. We had a stupid water company in New Jersey. And you had originally the bottles were glass. They're on the water cooler. And then later on they become plastic. But when they're glass, all the winemaking guys that I knew, we all switched to the glass jugs, and the old timers were using the wooden barrels, and they would lose wine. we would never lose it, because when you got that airlock on there, as the wine breathes, it's still fermenting a little bit. Uh, there's a water lock. It's an S, and it's got water in it. And then up at the top, you could take a little cap off to refill it with a little bit more water. I told him you put a piece of not tissue paper, um, paper towel over the top of it and put the cap on. And it still lets it breathe, but it keeps the fruit flies from getting in there or anything from crawling into the water lock and contaminating the wine. So I went there, and there's the water locks, and they got the little piece of paper in there, and he's like, "This is really easy," because the old days they had a cork that came down to a hose, and the hose went into a glass of water, and you would see bubbles coming up from the hose, and then when you didn't see bubbles coming up, it was time to re-rack the wine to another barrel, or barrel. Yeah, sounds right. So you get older, man, all the words get messed up in your head. But I just want to show you, I did go back with the gear, and we're ready for action now. I have it ready. I have to clean this gear up, because on here is super glue and grease. I don't know what the person was doing, but the person knew when they sold me this radio that this gear was broken. It would go in one direction, but it wouldn't go the other. And they tried gluing it, and plus all the other gears needed to be oiled. See, when I got a radio, I didn't turn any dials, because I know you could really mess something up, because it only takes one shaft to be bound up, and you start pushing it, it gets tighter. Now you can't get it apart. You have to use heat and all that. I've been down those roads. But think about that Hellcrafter's SX42. I was all finished, and I turn in the dial one way. I go turn it back. It won't come back. And I'm like to myself, what the hell's wrong? And the one thing I didn't touch was I did oil everything, but I didn't see this mess. I didn't see this mess. And there's another gear that gets press fitted on here after it gets back in the, and I showed you the puller and the whole thing, but I have enough splinted piece of brass on this versus just soldering the crack. And where it goes together, I put sandpaper in between and cleaned it up a little bit, just so the solder would flow into that. But also, when you stretch metal out, it might flare at the end. And I noticed that when I would squeeze the gear wouldn't go back together, because there were some, I won't say burrs, but similar to that. When the metal pulled apart, it tore. So if you squeeze this gear, it wouldn't go back together. I had to open the crack up a little bit more with sandpaper or emery paper, and then squeeze it, and then check it out with the calipers. And then when you slide it over this, it's a tight slide. It does go on. All right, the mainframe. Now when it hits that spline, it's going to press fit, and it's either going to break on me, and I'm going to have to. I don't want to buy the gear. I don't want to buy a full assembly of gears just to get this one gear. Tax and everything, the guy wants $100. The make of offer, he raised it on me. See, I looked at the make and offer thing, and I got an idea of what he wanted. And then I waited till my Social Security check cleared, and I went on there and made him an offer, and it just right away, it's just not high enough. I'm like, all right, so he saw me make an offer, and he pumped it up. And I'm like, you know what? At this point with that SX42, I don't like the Hellcrafters radios. I think they're absolute garbage. But I feel when I press fit this on, it's going to crack again. But I did the best I could do. I think that's it. All right, that's it.